For the fourth time this month, the Ukrainian Armed Forces have struck the largest hub of the Druzhba oil pipeline in the Bryansk region. Orban is already having a meltdown. He's howling that this was an unfriendly act against Hungary. And of course, he's writing letters to the American president complaining about Ukraine. Russian propaganda is whining too. But you know what else interesting happened? Russian divers decided to lift a Ukrainian drone from the bottom in one of the bays. And what happened? The drone detonated and simply wiped out the group of Russian divers who were doing this job. Yeah, they were elite Russian divers. They're gone now. At the same time, the operations of the Astrakhan port, Olya, have been paralyzed for a week after the Ukrainian drone attack on the night of the 15th, on August 15th. In addition, Belarus has announced joint military exercises with Russia involving 5,000 troops and 1,000 pieces of military equipment. What these exercises might lead to, we'll discuss right now. My name is Alexander Prepodobny. This is the channel Ukraine Today. Let's watch a report on all the most important news and then discuss it with an expert in the studio.
On August 21st, Ukrainian drones once again attacked the largest hub of the Druzhba oil pipeline. Of course, Hungary once again complained that this is yet another attempt to drag them into the war. And also, naturally, the oil supply has been halted.
Again, economists have carefully calculated that Russian oil refineries have unfortunately lost approximately 13% of their overall operational capacity recently, which is a significant reduction. And the most important indicator is Crimea, the still weak Donetsk Republic, Zabaikalsky Krai, and Chita Oblast. These are the regions where shortages of 95 and 92 octane gasoline are already being recorded. At gas stations, it either disappears or its price skyrockets. At the same time, only 100 octane gasoline is available. And interestingly, in some regions, ration coupons have appeared.
Meanwhile, on August 22nd, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense reported an elite elimination. One of the Ukrainian intelligence strike naval drones broke into the port of Novorossiysk in the Black Sea. And the Russian command was very eager to examine it.
During the handling of the Ukrainian naval drone, it detonated. As a result of the explosion, all 5 elite Russian submarine saboteurs were eliminated. Among the Russian fleet personnel based in Novorossiysk, there is sharp discontent over the senseless meat grinder order from the command to retrieve the Ukrainian naval drone, which led to the elimination of the elite group.
Meanwhile, operations at the Astrakhan port of Olya, through which Russia supplies weapons from Iran, have been paralyzed for a week following the Ukrainian drone attack on August 15th. The cargo ship Port Olya 4 was also hit there.
It is believed that it was carrying a large quantity of components from Iran, and I have seen satellite images showing part of the ship sticking out from beneath the water surface. Well, actually above the water, and it is quite possible that all of this is affecting navigation in the entire region.
And here's another piece of good news. The production rate of Ukrainian long-range drones has now matched the monthly output of Russian Shaheds. Moreover, Ukrainian drones are several times cheaper than their Russian counterparts.
The very fact that every night, or at least every other night, several dozen, close to 100, drones are flying into Russian territory is already a fact. Before we were happy if 1, 2, or 3 got through. Now they're coming by the dozens, even by the hundreds, and we consider this a normal occurrence.
So it turns out the Kremlin's master's expectations were not met. And we're not talking about a person, but about the much-praised hypersonic Zircon missile that Putin boasts about. Recently, Russia carried out the 14th launch of the missile, and as reported, it once again demonstrated very low efficiency and accuracy.
During comprehensive and rigorous testing, it consistently and precisely hit both diverse land targets and various sea targets, from submerged underwater vessels and surface ships, exactly as meticulously assigned and planned.
Belarus has announced yet another set of exercises with Russia. The main event is called Interaction 2025, which will take place in early September in the north of the Republic. In total, more than 5,000 people and about 1,000 pieces of equipment will be involved in the joint exercises this year.
Nothing new has happened. So there's this box called Zapad 2025, right? These exercises. And in the middle of this box, there are 3 compartments. They are called Interaction 2025, Search 2025, and Echelon 2025. So, in the middle of these exercises, there are 3 scenarios of some sort. As for the details, I'm not ready to say. But again, you need to look at the number of people involved. If we're talking about 5,000 servicemen, then honestly, I don't see anything serious here. I'm being sincere.
The Deep State platform reports on the advance of the Russian army in the Serebryansky forestry near Serebryanka in the Donetsk region and Olgovskoye in Zaporizhzhia. Nevertheless, it is noted that the defense forces have pushed the occupiers out of Tolstoye in the Donetsk region.
Military expert Roman Svitan is joining our broadcast. Roman, hello, we're glad to see you.
Greetings, wishing everyone good health.
Likewise. Ukrainian drones, this is the topic I want to start with, have put 15% of the oil refineries in the Russian Federation out of commission. Please comment, in general, how did we achieve this result and how much does it affect the war? And let me inform our viewers, because I think it's important to point this out. Just 2 days after the Druzhba oil pipeline resumed operations, Ukrainian forces shut it down again. And now Orban is already crying and whining that Russia can no longer pump gas to Europe. What's your assessment?
The only way for us to defeat Russia is to destroy its economy. The Russian Empire is a colossus with feet of clay, and those clay feet are Russia's oil and gas industry. The thing is, it brings in more than $1/3 trillion a year in revenue. That's over $300 billion. It is specifically from oil that Russia derives various advantages. But nevertheless, this includes oil refining, oil transportation, processing, oil refineries, gas condensate, pure gas, liquefied gas, and of course exports abroad. All of this together brings in $1/3 trillion. And it is with this money that Russia wages war, and with this money that Russia supports through state subsidies the majority of the Russian republics that are part of the Russian Federation. If the supply of petrodollars is stopped, Russia will fall apart, just as the Soviet Union once did, precisely because of the cessation of a sufficient flow of petrodollars, though back then it was due to oil prices. At that time, the international community acted correctly. It identified the axis of evil and lowered the price of oil for them. After that, for several years, the price of oil stayed around $20. And the Soviet economy collapsed, and the Soviet Union broke up into its constituent republics. The very same thing will inevitably happen to Russia if we, through comprehensive sanctions, and not just sanctions, but only sanctions, meaning with the crucial help of our brave armed forces of Ukraine, by directly and precisely striking Russian oil refineries and Russian oil pipelines, manage to effectively suspend or completely and utterly stop the significant flow of petrodollars into the Russian treasury. Russia will cease to exist. The only way for us to defeat a resource-rich state, which is an order of magnitude larger than us, at least 10 times in terms of resources and population, even if not 10, then 5 times, but still larger. So this is the mechanism, and this mechanism has finally been set in motion. For about half a year, up until around August, the drones produced by our defense industry or supplied by our partners or even purchased with public funds were used indiscriminately, sent wherever, basically just disposed of. We explained it in simple terms, and we discussed it with you on air as well, what needed to be done. We need to gather a sufficient number of drones, strike at a single target, and it's best if that's Russian oil infrastructure. It catches fire on its own. It's simply unrealistic for a drone to break into underground bunkers of some military facilities. Well, 50 kilograms won't breach any well-protected facility. And an oil refinery, there it is, it's practically waiting for a match to set it on fire. I'm exaggerating, of course, but just to illustrate the process. Naturally, you just need to reach the refinery, the Russian one. Now, over the past few weeks, about 3 weeks since the beginning of August, they've started carrying out combat missions correctly using long-range aviation strike assets, meaning those same drones. Moreover, they're choosing targets correctly, competently, according to a specific algorithm. They've already taken out, at the very least, some serious targets, more than 10%, as shown correctly in the report, more than 10% of Russia's oil industry. Both the Novokubishevsky, Ryazansky, Saratovsky, and Afipsky refineries, and there was a strike on the Rostov-Novoshakhtinsky plant. So these strikes, including the Volgograd plant, have at least given hope that by the end of the year, Russia's oil industry could be brought to a halt. At this pace, the main thing is just not to stop. Last year they stopped, this year they stopped. The main thing is that they don't stop the third round. By the end of the year, Russia will have no oil industry left as such. The reverse wave of unused, unconsumed oil will hit, forcing Russians to shut down their wells, and after that, they won't be able to reopen them for several years. So in this way, through technical and technological means, it's possible to stop the Russian economy. For example, the recent strikes clearly demonstrate just how effective they are. Why? Because the Russians already have no gasoline. Gasoline exports have already been halted. In other words, they're losing their oil, well, gasoline dollars, if you can call them that. They're simply not getting them since they're not exporting and there's not enough gasoline domestically. Next, it will be diesel, and after that, aviation kerosene. Aviation will be grounded. At the very least, it won't take off. Whether it lands or not, well, we'll see how it goes. Basically, it just won't take off. So for now, this inspires confidence in the actions of our armed forces. If things continue this way, it will be a serious shift in the war against Russia.
Roman Grigorievich, I want to ask you about the special operation that took place on August 26th, literally today. And in the Russian city of Novorossiysk, during an operation by the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, 5 elite divers were eliminated. They were trying, as I understand it, to retrieve a drone that had broken through into the Novorossiysk Bay, and as they tried to bring it to the surface, it detonated. Could you please tell us what you think about this kind of special operation? Honestly, I can't recall anything like this in the news reports over the past 3.5 years.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Well, if I may be sarcastic here, and I think it's appropriate, most likely our intelligence, or rather the Jur operatives, took advantage of a particular Russian trait, sticking their nose where they're not supposed to. And most likely they slapped a serious warning on that drone, do not touch, danger of death. Well, naturally, that means Russians were guaranteed to mess with it, because whenever you see a sign on an electrical panel that says, do not touch, danger of death, you can be sure there will be a dead Russian hanging there. It's the same story here. They went in to carry out, as they call it, a combat mission to extract the warhead from the combat drone, meaning the explosive part of the combat drone. They managed to extract it, and naturally it exploded. They lost a significant number of specialists because divers, especially GRU operatives, are quite elite units, and it's definitely impossible to replace such losses quickly. That's why, as I understand it, the next ones will be, for example, our drones, which will be used for flooding, let's say. For such missions to eliminate the Russian elite, there will be something like 40 degrees or happy vodka, just to make sure they definitely go for it. So moments like these will be used. Of course, that's sarcasm, but in reality, the combat mission didn't end with a strike on a Russian target or the flooding of some Russian ship or military facility. However, it did result in the elimination of several heads of elite Russian units, which in principle is also not bad.
Let's move on. New footage has emerged of combat tests of the pink Ukrainian cruise missile called Flamingo. The video shows in higher quality the launch of the FP5 Flamingo missile and the FP1 drone. The drone is launched with the help of a rocket booster, like a missile. So in fact, we can probably show these videos to our viewers. Let's discuss what's going on with this missile, Roman Grigorievich. After all, given the uncertainty surrounding future American supplies, we really want to understand whether we can produce it on an industrial scale. Based on the information currently available to the public, what are the drawbacks and strengths of this missile? What's your opinion?
As a pilot, I really want to understand, why wasn't it made earlier? A missile like this could have been produced at our facility in a year and a half. In other words, during this administration's term, we could have made these kinds of missiles 3 times, maybe even 4 times. The technical documentation is developed. It's roughly like the V1, and it can be developed within 6 months. Within a year, you have pre-production testing and then launch it into mass production. So there you have it, 1.5 years to develop this missile. It's been 7 years now. The guys have been sitting around. And as I said before, they could have launched it 4 times already. So basically, the missile should have existed from the start. Well, it's just too easy to make it under our conditions. Why is that? Because we launched the drone in no time at all, just like that AN-196 Lyuchi. And this control system is pretty much the same. Moreover, it's even simpler for the missile in this regard because it has a pretty serious turbojet engine. We produce turbojet engines, either dual circuit turbojets or even just single circuit ones without the dual circuit complexity. We manufacture them ourselves. We have a whole range of these engines, probably about 10 or so. Even our foreign partners install our engines on their drones. For example, the Turkish project uses our engine. The MIU's project, Kizilelma, has 2 engines, the subsonic AI-25 TLTS and the supersonic AI-322F with afterburner. So they take them without any issues. For us, the engine is not a problem. In a missile, the main thing is the engine. In a missile, well, at least in a subsonic cruise missile, the main thing is the engine so that it can run for at least a few hours. It needs to fly to push the missile 3,000 kilometers, so it has to work for about 4 hours, for example. That's it. It doesn't require high precision. In other words, it doesn't need to have tens of thousands of flight hours. It just needs to run for 4 hours at a speed of 800 to 900 kilometers per hour, and it will definitely push the missile 3,000 kilometers. The warhead there is over 1,000 kilograms. That is a ton. Just take any FAB 1000 and that's it. There you go. That's your warhead already. You don't even need to make it. We have plenty of aerial bombs. We don't know what to do with them because our aviation doesn't go beyond the line of contact. It doesn't use free fall aerial bombs. We have FAB 500, FAB 1000, and FAB 250. So you take this aerial bomb, insert it into a tube from one side, and on the other side attach engines and a rectangular wing. Then certain aerodynamic calculations, the laws of aerodynamics come into play. These are the laws of physics. They are unambiguous. That's roughly how you get a V1. Here you go. Here's the Flamingo for you. It's the same as the V1. So when was it made? The Germans built it almost 100 years ago. So it's a very simple missile. I still don't know why it doesn't exist yet. It should definitely exist, and I think we'll finally see it in the near future. Well, aside from videos, teasers, and performances by certain artists, we'll finally get to see the missile in action. What does it mean for a missile to be in action? For example, if we take the Omsk oil refinery, the largest refinery in Russia, it processes 21 million tons. It's located about 3,000 kilometers from our border, down near Kazakhstan, not far from Aktobe, well, not far by local standards from Aktobe. So if a 1-ton warhead explodes there, believe me, any expert will be able to determine what kind of warhead it was, give or take a few hundred kilograms. Naturally, all of this will be shown on video. Russians really love this, checking in on a mountain, especially near a hot oil refinery, and even more so if they can warm up for free. Russians love anything that's free. So we'll see all of this on video, and only then can we start talking about the fact that we have a missile. For now, we can say that we have some videos of a certain missile that is supposed to fly, but let me repeat once again, in simple terms, making a V1 is as easy as pie. Back then, the Germans put a pulse jet engine on the V1, which was cheap, practically cost nothing, and made a very distinctive, loud noise. You could hear it really well. If we put our turbojet engine on it, our cheap engines, then the missile itself will also be cheap. So basically, you could really produce them, I don't know, dozens per day. Not just one a day, but dozens. You just need to scale up the production. And just bombard them with drones the way the Russians are bombarding us with Gerents. In the end, we could bombard them with these 3,000-kilometer range missiles. And it's very important for us to be able to reach 2,500 kilometers, all the way to the Urals, the main Russian military factories, which can only be destroyed by tons of munitions. And even better, it shouldn't just be a high explosive, but a tandem warhead, so that it can reach underground shelters, meaning the underground workshops of Russian factories. Uralvagonzavod, for example, has several underground floors at the very least. To reach them, you need charges like these, because as soon as the missile appears, believe me, the first ones to talk about it will be the Russians. As long as they're silent, it means the missile isn't working yet.
Well, it's hard to disagree with you here, because as soon as something pops up in Russian public channels, whoa, this is probably the Flamingo, that will be the best result. Roman Grigorievich, it's being reported that US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and American military officials recently held consultations with the leaders of key European defense countries, as well as with NATO representatives to coordinate opportunities for cooperation. So, as I understand it, one of the options discussed was air support, drones, as well as working with pilots and accordingly aircraft. Please tell us, another option is the deployment of troops on the territory of Ukraine. Even Romania, as I read somewhere, is apparently ready to provide its NATO bases for such a staging area and hub, probably for training purposes. But also the possibility of closing the skies over Ukraine. It's important to note, all of this is reported by Reuters. This is all unofficial information. What do you think of these kinds of hypotheses? Is it really possible to actually do something like this and implement any of the above-mentioned options?
Well, there are two sectors here that can be discussed. The involvement of foreign troops on our side before our victory, or the involvement of foreign troops after our capitulation. What is currently being discussed in the information space is the involvement of foreign troops as so-called security guarantees after we capitulate. We will sign a peace agreement as a result of which we will lose a fifth of our territory and commit not to reclaim it by military means. No return by military means, or rather the cessation of armed struggle for our territory. In military slang, this is called capitulation. The entire and fundamental point of capitulation, the primary reason why armies consistently try to force another opposing army to completely capitulate, is precisely and exactly to make the opposing army definitively give up armed struggle as a direct and inevitable result of combat operations and military engagements. But in our case, the military and political leadership, without even having suffered defeat on the battlefield, is already giving up. In other words, the army is still fighting, but the military and political leadership is already ready to give up armed struggle for the occupied territories. That is, they are already capitulating. This is nonsense, absolute nonsense. There is absolutely no logic here. They need to make up their minds, either be smart or be pretty. That is, either we fight until victory or we surrender. So they are surrendering, and at the same time the army is still fighting. That's why there's this kind of split at the very least. When analyzing, it's unclear what exactly to analyze. Naturally, it's unclear what kind of analysis, for example, to apply to the information so far just from tabloids about the deployment of troops on our territory. After capitulation, but we're still fighting. Our main task, according to the Constitution and the same oath that every service member gives to the people of Ukraine, interestingly to the people, not the government, is to preserve sovereignty and territorial integrity. In other words, land and freedom, as the Cossacks would say, but in reality up to the borders, to the state border. So in that case, there's no point in talking about someone wanting to help us somewhere after capitulation. Why would we need that help after we've surrendered? Well, capitulation means surrendering our interests. That is, we've surrendered to the mercy of the victor, the Russians. And after that, someone is supposed to guarantee us something. What would be the point of such a guarantee then? There's no point in waving your fist after the fight is over. So the very proposal itself is illogical at this point. At this stage, our basic, so to speak, fundamental actions on this geopolitical front are still unclear. Let me repeat, someone wants to capitulate, is running around with the idea of stopping hostilities and taking on the obligation not to return the occupied territories by military means. The army is working towards victory. So first, let's settle this, and only then will we start talking and analyzing who wants what, how they want to help us, or on the contrary, how they want to tear us apart after our capitulation.
The conclusion is clear. We need to win on the battlefield, and only then discuss what to do next. Roman Grigorievich, thank you very much for joining us on the air. Roman Tsvetan, military expert, was on the air with Ukraine today. All the best to you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.